Welcome family, friends, acquaintances and even strangers. Today is January the 5th. What happened today in history is the creation of the German Workers' Party in 1919. Workers' Party which would then later grow up to become the National Socialist. Okay, maybe not. Let's go for something a little bit more democratic, like the creation of the Constitution of Democratic Kampuchea, which was proclaimed by the Khmer Rouge. Okay, fine, maybe not that one either. Today is the proclamation of US President Richard Nixon of the Space Shuttle program, beginning in 1972. Okay, that's uncontroversial enough. We will go with that. Today, we have a round of changes to the dungeons, and when I say round of changes, I mean round of nerfs. So let's go over which dungeons and in which capacity they have been nerfed. Now, take in mind that this week is the week of Tyrannical, after we went through Fortified, precisely the easiest Fortified week of the season. Today we have the easiest Tyrannical week of the season. So, good to know that after the holiday break of the developers, we have come back in time to get some changes before Tyrannical Week, as some of the bosses would have been quite scary if they were left untouched in this week. So let's go over and check what has changed in terms of nerfs to the bosses in Mythic Plus. Let's immediately start with number one. Number one is the Overgrown Ancient, i.e. the tree boss of Algeth'ar Academy. Blizzard points out this nerf in a very gray area, because what they are telling us is increase the amount of time between abilities, particularly in relation to Burst Forth, which is like, okay, but where are the numbers? What does this even mean? Upon further experimentation, the discovery is that prior to the nerf, first of all, the tank buster being slammed at the tank every 18-ish seconds is now happening every 30 seconds. So it's going to be way less deadly, way less taxing on the tank. More importantly, previously, before this boss was nerfed, branch out used to happen every 50 seconds. Now it happens every 60. Now this might make you believe, oh, this means we have 10 more seconds to kill the plants before they become active. There is also another change, a change to Germinate. Germinate is what actually puts the plants on the ground. Previously, it was happening every 20 seconds and 28 seconds, alternating 2028, 2028. Now it's happening every 25 and 34. So they happen also a little bit later. The TLDR is that previously you had 30 or 22 seconds of time to kill the plants before they become active. Now you have 35 to 26 seconds to kill the plants before they become active. So TLDR, you have 5 to 6 seconds extra to get rid of the plants before they get active and start swarming the tank and the party. And also TLDR, you have longer windows before these things happen. So you have more time, for example, to kill the big ad before the plants actually spawn. So you have less of that very dangerous overlap where you have the plants out and the big ad is dying and you have to get inside of the circle. But you also have Germinate, you have the circles on the ground chasing you, so you can't get inside. People still try to get inside the circle and get killed by Germinate, right? That thing has been made more manageable on the first boss of Algeth'ar Academy. That was the only change to the bosses in Algeth'ar Academy, which is fair. The other bosses are more or less fine in that dungeon. We have further changes and further nerfs to the second boss of Azure Vault, Azure Blade. This was already nerfed significantly before this, and now they get another round of nerfs. Blizzard points out, once again, very nebulous, very question marky, increased the time it takes for Azure Blade to drain her mana. Okay, fine, what does this actually mean in practice? Well, in practice, it means that it's going to be 5 to 8 seconds extra in the first part. As soon as you pull the boss, it's going to be a 5 to 8 seconds extra window, and then a 10 seconds longer window every time she comes back after the first intermission. So the TLDR is you're going to be spending some 20% more time actually fighting her rather than fighting her images. Further TLDR, you might be skipping an extra intermission phase now because you get to kill her faster. That is the main change of the actual boss. Again, the only boss being changed in Azure Vaults. Perhaps there might have been some reasons to change a couple of others, but this was definitely the more challenging one. And it will be, now that we are in Tyrannical, the more challenging one for this week. We then have a change to Nokhud Offensive. So it's good to know that finally we have gotten some acknowledgement that Terra and Maruk were becoming a problem, especially this week. They would have been a massive problem in Tyrannical, because all of the attention in this dungeon was being taken up by the Raging Tempest, the big elemental boss, but Terra and Maruk had a pretty dangerous thing that was happening. What was happening was the Gale Arrow, the mechanic that is going to spawn all the tornadoes around you. Now, the difficult part wasn't actually dodging the little tornadoes, although according to my pags that seems to be incredibly difficult. The difficult part was that you were also taking a massive amount of damage. As soon as the tornado spawned from you, you were taking 80-90% of your whole HP. This week in Tyrannical, in high keys, as soon as you get into the 19 to 20 range, that might have even one-shotted. The problem is that after you take that damage, the boss would still cast very quickly her Quick Shot. Quick Shot is just an unavoidable, undodgeable, instant hit from Terra that hits you for 200 to 150,000 damage. So what happened is, the Gale Arrow mechanic happens, the party gets down to 20% HP, all of them, and then Quick Shot happens and one player just instantly dies because it's just too much damage in quick succession. So the actual change is that now there is going to be a 3-second gap from when Gale Arrow spawns and you take the damage to when Terra actually starts casting Quick Shot. So now you have at least a 3-second window for yourself and for the healer to actually save you, basically. Now, despite the fact that we said it's good that Blizzard is acknowledging Terra and Maruk in Tyrannical to be nerfed, we still have nerfs for the Raging Tempest. Still, after the one round of nerfs from last week, I think, a couple of weeks ago, now we have another one. Lightning Strike damage has been reduced by 10%, and more importantly, Energy Surge damage has been reduced by 50%, and even more importantly, Surge of Power duration has been increased from 15 seconds to 18. The main change here is that Energy Surge was the buff that would give a steroid to the boss. Very dangerous and mostly ignorable if you had a purge, an offensive purge dispel in your party. Namely, to make it easy, a Demon Hunter that just dispels the boss. Obviously, if you don't have a purge dispel this week on Tyrannical, you would have felt the damage this boss was doing on the tank. So to make it easier, to make it less painful to not have a dispel in your group, they are nerfing this buff on the boss by 50%. The other important change is that Surge of Power, meaning the buff you gain when you pick up the little orbs, is now 18 seconds instead of 15. It looks like it's just a minor increase, right? It is actually very important because the boss was designed in such a way where every 3 rounds of orbs, you were going to have a gap. A gap of not enough orbs spawning, a gap long enough that all of your previously gained stacks would drop, and then you would have to restart from 1. So you were losing 50% damage, you were losing 50% healing, because all of your stacks, your 10 maximum stacks of these orbs would drop. With these buffs being extended to 18 seconds, now you have just enough time to actually extend this buff with a 100% uptime throughout the fight. As long as you make sure to not instantly take them immediately as soon as they spawn, right? If you leave a couple of them for yourself, one for yourself to take a little bit later on, you can very easily now extend your orb uptime, your buff uptime, for the duration of the fight. That is a good buff for yourself in the Raging Tempest fight as well. We then have nerfs to the Ruby life pools, yet another one of these tricky dungeons when it comes to bosses, and this week on Tyrannical even more so. Nerfs to the first boss. This was the question mark of the last time we saw nerfs to the Ruby life pools. Second and third boss were being nerfed, but not the first one, which looked to be the hardest one in the first place. So nerf number 1 reduced the absorb value of Ice Bulwark by 25%, so it's gonna be easier to break it out and to take less AoE damage in the duration. Worth mentioning that the Wailing Arrow ability of Hunters actually instantly breaks the shield, so that is still super OP for this fight, but now breaking the shield is going to be made easier. The other nerf also very, very important, the party-wide periodic damage of Chillstorm has been reduced by 33%, by 1/3. So, severely nerfed the 2 instances of heavy AoE damage happening to the party. This boss now is way more manageable, way more simple overall in terms of the strain it's gonna put on you and your healer to survive this fight on higher tyrannical keys. Still though, even though the first boss wasn't nerfed the last time, and now it is, we have yet another round of nerfs to Algeth'ar Stormvein, which is the last boss of Ruby Life Pulse. Nerf number 1, Interrupting Cloudburst now only has a 2-second school lockout instead of a 4-second interrupt duration, which is okay. Well, whatever, you weren't supposed to get interrupted by that anyways. The more important nerf is the fact that now Storm Slam, the magic damage debuff put on the tank, is now cast less frequently. This is quite good because if you are a healer especially, you might have realized how often this was up. It was almost up as soon as your Dispel was back off cooldown and was basically forcing you to use many of your global cooldowns very often on your tank, made a little bit more difficult by the amount of movement you had to do in the last boss, having to move around because of the winds, having to move around because the dragon is trying to breathe fire in your face, so sometimes you were a bit too far away from the tank, so your Dispel was late, and because your Dispel was late, the next time you had to Dispel, your cooldown was even longer, so it was making it sort of like a snowball thing in trying to get those debuffs off of your tank. Now it's gonna be made more manageable. Still not as huge of a nerf as the first nerfs that this boss received, but still a good quality of life change, in particular to your healer in this boss fight. The last of the dungeons being nerfed is Temple of the Jade Serpent. We actually have a change not to the dungeons bosses, but to the trash first for the temple, because the Lesser Shah and the Malformed Shah's ability to do Shah Eruption no longer ignores line of sight. So, both of the Shahs that are spawned from the big guy, both of the Shahs that are part of the actual trash mobs, so both of the types of Shah that blow up and do a bunch of party damage, now can be line of sighted. So you can, for example, pull them back in the little corridor before the big room and simply sidestep behind a wall to ignore all of the AoE damage, for example. So now that's also made more manageable. Perhaps won't be that big of an issue this week anyways in Tyrannical, but still good to know, still good to remind that these explosions can be line of sighted now. The actual nerf to the boss is to the Shah of Doubt. Of course, the more dangerous of bosses in there. Increased the recast cooldown of Touch of Nothingness. Touch of Nothingness is the Dispel, that's the dot mechanic, the double dot mechanic. It is a nerf to the party-wide AoE damage of Touch of Nothingness. That is what gets changed. So just like many of the other bosses that we have just seen now, the AoE damage being done to the party is what is getting hit on the last boss of this dungeon. And these, for today, were all of the changes as we enter this tyrannical reset. Actually, never mind. Future Izen here, breaking in old Izen's video to point out that there has been an additional hotfix coming in post-weekly reset, which also ended up nerfing Court of Stars. And of course, pretty much the only possible annoying part of Court of Stars, which is the last boss. Of course, as we are getting in Tyrannical Week, that would have been kind of a problem. The nerf is that the damage of the clones Slicing Maelstrom has been nerfed by 44%, and the damage of the boss Slicing Maelstrom has been nerfed by 20%. This is going to average out to be roughly a 33-ish% nerf to the ability. So basically 1/3 less to heal during this mechanic. You know, we were pointing out that this dungeon was quite simple together with Shadow Moon Burial Grounds, but if there was one thing, just one thing, worth nerfing in the dungeon was definitely the last boss, on Tyrannical especially. Interesting how we got no further changes to Halls of Valor. You know, the ticking brand damage of Odin is not getting changed. Some, perhaps, of the damage patterns of Fenrir not getting changed. That's perhaps the more interesting part of Halls of Valor, not getting touched by these nerfs. But besides that, the rest of the dungeons were expected to be a little bit more toned down in their power, in their obnoxiousness. So it's good that even though we had to wait perhaps a tiny bit more than what we wanted to because of the holidays, it's good that now we are getting some more set of changes to these dungeons. While we are closing today's video about the nerfs to these Mythic Plus keys, let me guys know, of course, which were your biggest problems, your biggest pet peeves and issues that you found in these dungeons in last 45 week. Maybe this week on Tyrannical you will find different ways to complain about some of these bosses, but still, let me guys know what were your concerns and if any of these nerfs have actually answered your prayers about these bosses. For today, we are leaving each other on this Thursday. Thanks, of course, as usual, to all of my Patreon supporters for contributing to support and to help the growth of myself and this channel. You can still support in other ways, which don't include spending money. Liking and commenting down below, as well as subscribing to the channel itself, are perfectly fine ways. You can also support even more by following me on Twitter. That would help. And even if you don't care, like me, about Twitter, you can still chill out in there to figure out when I go live on stream, for example. That would be the best way to get notified. And lastly, of course, talking about streaming, I am live nowadays on Twitch, streaming from roughly 10 p.m. Central European times, 1 p.m. Pacific, and 4 p.m. Eastern US time zones. So with this out of the way, thank you guys again for watching. See you guys soon, and in the meantime, I always hate it when I have to finish a video and cut a video and then go out to shop for some groceries and then come back in time to start raiding. It always feels like I'm too cramped for time